I had this. I'm gonna call it a download thought, which I'm gonna run by you, and it might sound crazy. You might throw it out, but it was that uh, people talk of God and Satan, dark and evil, but I kind of this thought I had was that Satan and God are the same thing. They're both expressions of love, except God is the fullest expression of love for others, and Satan is the fullest expression of love for oneself at the expense of others. It's kind of they're both expressions of love, but at the end of the day, it's who do you want to serve others or serve yourself in a way, and it kind of I was trying to maybe bring a unity aspect of the universe and try and remove some of that dualism.
That's a very good
Does that
download.
does that resonate?
Well, no, it's a very good download to have. We have to understand something. Let's take away all matter from the universe. No capacity for anything to exist physically. Let's just take it all away. What have we got left? We've got left consciousness. Consciousness has no capacity then to understand itself because it's either got to create illusory processes where it can interact with itself and deny that it exists so that it can have the experience, or it has to create matter, a universe, and then extend itself into that matter in all forms via a process called quanta, and then understand its own experience by itself from it. That experience is externalized. And once we understand that, one, nothing really exists. It's basically the matrix. It's the illusion. Not even the matrix exists. The other thing is that without the opposites, and you said before dualistic behavior, but without infinite opposites, not just two, good or bad, but infinite opposites, consciousness, source consciousness, cannot learn about what it needs to extend itself to understand.
Yeah. I think that reminds me of, I think it's Robert Spira that talks about how consciousness, to know what it is, it had to individualize itself and to be able to see itself from different perspectives to be able to know what it is.
Yeah,
in the same way that if you
5 years old.
Say again, sorry.
I knew that when I was 5 years old.
that's crazy.
Well, and what Spiro's hitting on is what you hear is a reoccurring, somewhat New Age philosophy, and that is that there is the one as a being that did not know itself and was the only existing being in all of the universe, all the metaverses, and it wanted to know itself. In order to do that, it had to create a reflection. And the right reflection is what is called all that is. And so you have the one, and all that is a reflection of the one, and we are reflections of all that is. So that it moves down through the human chain in such a way that we are all one, participating in the consciousness. But Paul, I thought you made a really good point about the infinite ends, the not just this end and that end, but the infinity of the ends of that. And behind you, you have a triangle, and it has a base and a point. And that always, those triangles always remind me of the infinite ends at the bottom and the balance point at the top. That you can see both of those things and learn through comparison between the infinite ends of what is called right and wrong, good or bad, or whatever you want to see it as, this or that, and be able to see both of those and then make a choice as to what your preference is. So it's kind of funny that you would have that symbolism behind you.
The difference is that I actually met the being that calls itself source consciousness. Okay? And they call themselves the Honorians. And you can't get any close to them at all. This is the thing. The second that you try to move close to this source conscious entity, you fail yourself. Your own consciousness fails because in moving close to source consciousness, it recognizes itself and you must no longer exist.
Okay, I think I'm going to listen to that again and again and again, and maybe I'll get it. That's mind-boggling. Definitely.
Just roll it around in your mouth a little bit. It'll sink in.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I definitely can if you want. Do you want me to tell you the story?
Yeah, if you can expand on it, yeah, it might help.
So I was with the Zetas, and there's a specific multidimensional gateway that we go through that is used to move to other races. And the Zetas, I was saying to them one day, do you know who God is? And they said, yeah, we'll show you. And we ended up standing in the middle of the universe, or wherever the middle is. There is no middle. And we could see this bright glow on the edge of the horizon. And they said, we think that that is source consciousness. And I said, okay, no problem. So me being the adventurous soul that I am, I decided that I was going to go to meet this entity one day. I didn't say when. One day I was in deep trance with another medium, so we were both sitting across from each other, and we both linked into this race that called themselves the Honorians. The Honorians started speaking to each other and talking about how they extensualize themselves so that they don't realize from a perspective that it's them talking to each other. We then did a sitting a week later with a whole group of people, and the Honorians came through and they said to the group, we're going to bring through a child. Don't tell the child that they don't exist. It's me, but I'm going to extend myself. And if we don't tell the child that it doesn't exist, and I don't tell myself that the child is me, we can have a conversation and learn. This child then comes through the other medium and starts speaking like a spirit entity. It's really interesting. And the Honorian is talking to the child spirit as though it doesn't know who that being is. Now, I thought this was incredibly complicated way of learning until I was actually then in that same sitting taken to like a big glass pane. And I could look through the glass pane and I could see a plane of light. And it was just this plane that went continually forever. And it had all aspects to it. And as I was standing there, the Honorians said, would you like to come closer? Now, even when they said those words, I saw the whole pane of glass crack. I felt myself move forward, and then I was about to become gone, just gone. And I said, no, I don't want to come closer. I do not want to meet you. And I stepped back. And as I stepped back, I was back in body again and out of trance. And I realized that to move to source consciousness means that they recognize themselves in you, and you can no longer exist as a singular consciousness or entity.
Okay. That's a story that's it's next level compared to seeing a craft in terms of experience.
Oh, I don't know. I like seeing craft. We get so excited.
Yeah.
Especially when they start to lower themselves down and they tell you that they're coming. That's a real buzz, if I can use that word. It's interesting.
Yeah. But it's also mind-blowing. It's hard to really sort of almost find a way to describe it and relate to it in any way, you know, compared to our everyday lives. It's crazy. And what the lives, and what do you have any thoughts around what the lives are like for these Honorians? I mean, their day-to-day experiences. I mean, it's not like what we have a day-to-day experiences, but their conscious experience. How vastly different is it?
Well,
any ideas?
They have said that they live in a void. They don't even live in the multiverses. So for them, the multiverse is like a big TV screen, and everything that takes place there is us. It's like you watching TV. You go, that movie is really interesting, but what if you were the actual actor in the movie, but you didn't realize you were? That's the difference. And so for them, the multiverses are the big TV screen where they're learning about themselves.
Sounds like the architect in the Matrix.
Well, look, it is, but I think that's actually a limited understanding of itself.
Sure, I imagine. Yeah.
You know, but anyway.
Yeah. That's and do they? I guess you wouldn't know, but do you think they have a world behind them that they're not a reality that they're learning to expand into?
Yeah. I think that everything is infinite and cyclical, you know, like the infinity. It's all one. Everything is one. I'll give you an example. So I was meditating and I decided to go to the edge of the undulating universe. Okay, that's a good place to go if you want to have an experience. You know, people talk about the Big Bang and all these things. So I just went there and I moved towards the edge of what's classed as physical creation within the void. And as I've come to the end, there's this hissing noise. There's like you would with the astral traveling when you're separating from your physical body. Some people get a hissing noise or a popping noise. And you could see as the edge of the universe was moving out, it was creating itself. As it moved out further, I decided to go over to have a look. I went over the edge, as you do. And as I've gone over the edge, I've come straight back up inside and out myself. And then I realized that everything is one, everything is infinite, everything is cyclic. There is nothing, there's no outer, there's no inner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's hard to understand, but yeah, the infinite and the zero, they're kind of the same thing, and it
sure
explains the universe. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to understand from the standpoint that we live in a physical universe that has a very physical body, and we see things through physical eyes and perceive things through a physical mind, and that's all creates a problem that you would think would be overcome with common sense. And I'd say common sense being the idea that either everything is one or everybody is separate. And we just have too much identification of the oneness of the universe than we have for the separateness of it. But we're stuck behind this kind of glass wall, and we're having to look out and say, gosh, I'm myself, but yet I am part of this entire universe. How do I reconcile my separateness, my individuality, if you want to say it that way, with the wholeness of it? And that's a difficult thing, I believe, to grab your hands around. The idea that you can be part of a collective like the Zetas are, and part of a human. That's something I think it's difficult for us to deal with simply from a philosophical standpoint, if not just a practical standpoint as well.
Yeah. And I imagine these conversations aren't unique to us. I imagine they're being had amongst the Zetas and all other races, and they're still trying to figure it all out, I imagine, as well.
No, the Zetas say nothing exists. See, for them, they say nothing exists. We are all just coagulated matter that's performing a function based on consciousness. And because they understand that, they just get on with it. They don't bother to debate it. They don't try to be singular entities. That's why they work as a collective consciousness. They're not trying to hold their individuality like humanity is. Humanity's trying to desperately hold on to its individuality. And while they do that, they hold themselves in separation from source.
Yeah, which has its level of suffering combined with that.
Well, we suffer because we're in separation.
Yeah. Would you say that's the ego? Or is it more than that?
I don't, when we talk about the ego is known by many things. Some people think the ego is the ability just to be rude to somebody, but the ego actually is the ego and the super consciousness. It has multiple facets. And you need an ego to actually live physically in matter on planet. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. But of course, that's if you're in service to self. If you're in service to others, as we've seen lately, the planet's all now being in service to others, which is becoming a really good thing. Then, of course, you can realize that you can rely on other people. It's not so much about the individual anymore. It's more about the global community.
Would you say the Zetas have an ego?
Not that I've found, because here's another point that we need to understand. With the Zetas, they use containers. So we have a physical body, humans, and humans need to gestate, be born, grow. The consciousness stays in physical form, the body then passes, and then you return back to your space. But what if you were able to just clone yourself and then just jump from here to the next body? You see, your potential for worry would be a lot less, because you'd be going, if anything happens to this one, I'll just jump to the next one.
Mm-hmm. And that happens a lot.
Well, that's exactly what they do. All of the race do that. That's why when you're on craft, or when people are on craft, they see the containers probably either in a special holding area, or some containers are around the craft walls, because either the containers have just been maturated, or those beings are in stasis, because the consciousness that exists in those containers is actually performing another function somewhere else. Those beings that are in the stasis chambers could actually be on other craft, or off planet, or off world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about their own world, not human world, off world, performing other functions.
When you talk about containers, do you mean lifeless bodies they're waiting to be used, or is it
animated? Yeah, I'm talking about bodies, physical bodies that have no consciousness. It's as if you're in a coma and your consciousness is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them, they're able to populate the containers that they create, that are genetically created and modified per consciousness, right? So that you may have, I know this sounds a bit strange, you may have 2 or 3 containers that you can populate, depending on where you need to go. So if you happen to have a container here on planet, on Earth, you just leave the container here. And then if you're over 40 light years away, all you do is jump your consciousness straight over to the container on the planet, because there's no such thing as speed with thought. Thought has no speed, or is limited by any type of speed.
But are you able to consciously be in 2 containers at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or multiple?
3, you can be in 3 if you want.
3? Is that like a universal limit, or is that just what you were aware of?
Well, source consciousness is in infinite containers, isn't it?
Well, I guess so.
Yeah,
in a way. So how do you experience 3 separate containers? Are you kind of swapping between them all, or are you kind of like amalgamating the conscious? I don't know. I'm speculating here that.
That's all right. So spirit realm has what's classed as an oversoul, and the oversoul contains infinite facets. Silver Birch, a great spirit person that came through a medium, would talk about a diamond, and each of the facets or the faces of the diamond were individuated spirit people. If you think about the diamond as being the oversoul, then of course you can understand that all those individuated forms are actually one consciousness. It's not hard for the oversoul to have, say, 1 million or 10 million, whatever the number you want to choose, incarnations or lives. It could be, that oversoul could have 1 million humans currently living as spirit people. So, these concepts that are real and exist, they actually are used universally by races, by spirits. And it's only when we start to say, well, I understand this concept from this perspective, it's because we're using a filtering system to understand something, and that's okay. We're supposed to use filtering systems. That's the way we're designed. It keeps us safe.
And what's his society like for the Zetas in terms of day-to-day living? I mean, I'm thinking a bit, just if you wanted to just describe the variance in the UK, between just Scotland, England, and Wales, the language, the culture, or even just Birmingham versus Manchester, or all the different variations of people, their thoughts, their culture, the food, what music they like, all these things. Is it the same in Zeta society, that there's that kind of level of variance?
Yeah, absolutely. So, very good question. The Zeta, the grey species, it's got 63 races, and previously, about 12 months ago, I only really knew 2 of the races, and we were really lucky or blessed that we came across another one, or another couple of them, and they actually were able to interact with us. And we didn't realize there was such diversity in those races. One specific race is based in ethical decision-making processes and things where they would discuss, if they were, say, they're in the Milky Way galaxy and there's multiple races there, what is the ethics of first contact? What is the ethics of intervening in a human situation? And the race work in a hive mind process to come to decision-making processes. So for them, their life is different to what we call the biological zeta race. The biological zeta race work very much with chemicals and living organs, living organisms, these sorts of things. And the way that they actually perform functions with other races is working with all of the cellular matter of a race. Biological technologies. Another race is based around consciousness, and they exist in the hive mind, and they oversee the 62 races. Although there are 63, they only oversee 62, because the abductor race are the ones that are doing the abductions. They're not part of the collective consciousness of the Zeta race. So yes, there is a lot of difference, and I could spend hours talking about all the different races and what they do and how they do it.
But how do you know all this stuff? Is this from asking them questions, or is there some sort of intuition?
We have a book called the Zeta Interviews, and that's about 500 or 600 pages, and they're asked all these questions. But, you know, Syann and I, we also spend a lot of time off-world as well, on craft, on other planets. You don't have to physically travel to a lot of these places at all. You ask other people that are contactees. They've also been off-world, and they've been on other planets as well. And there's a lot of experience to have. This is why people remote view. This is why people astral. You all know that you have the capacity to travel and journey. You were asking me about astraling before, Joe. You know that you've got the capacity to do these things. It's where we hold ourselves in the disbelief. And in that disbelief, we then limit our capacity to travel.
Yeah, but and that's different to dreaming in terms of what people anticipate. That if people haven't astral traveled, they may think, oh, that they probably associate it more related to dreams, but there's definitely a key difference. I was talking to Walter about this previously and trying to get try and get an understanding of how you know, right, I'm astral traveling rather I'm dreaming now. What would your answer to be to that?
That's why I wrote the study guide. It's just a 50-page study guide. It teaches people about the basics of consciousness, all the different definitions that are applicable. And then there's practicals on actually how to get out of your body. It's for beginners. And the reason is because I have a lot of people go, I dream and I travel, or I lucid dream and I travel. No, that's not astral travel. Astral traveling is when you do a consciousness separation and you actually look at your physical body. You're able to touch your own astral hand, and it feels physical like that. Mm-hmm. And also then you make cognitive decisions about where you're going to go, which dimension you're going to travel to. Now, I knew when I was a kid there was 11 dimensions. I was visiting them all, and now scientists suddenly come up with some mathematical equation. There's 11 dimensions.
I remember reading about that in string theory and talking about multiple dimensions before all of this stuff. So yeah. It's quite incredible how they got to that conclusion at some point.
I talk about that.
I
talk about that in the study guide. I go through the different dimensions, just what they are, how they relate to each other. Where's spirit realm? What dimension is spirit realm? What dimension is astral? What dimension do other interdimensional entities live in as well?
Sorry, Walter, you were.
Well, this idea of catching up is that Paul was, alluding to. That's kind of a fun thing, because it's not only earthly science starting to barely catch up with us. It's that the channeled information that is available is now starting to catch up with each other. In other words, there is a lot of similarity in the messages coming through the channelers of information, extraterrestrial channelers, spirit channelers of information. We didn't necessarily see a lot of that 20 years ago. You saw a lot of discrepancies, and you saw a lot of what I call half information. But with Paul's work and with others' work, we're starting to get real definitions of things. We're starting to get ideas and concepts that you can reach for to help explain ordinary circumstances and physical reality. So when he says catching up, he means, I believe, in a number of different areas. He means in science, he means in philosophy, he means in mediumship, and he means in just conversations like this. This is not a conversation, Joe, that you and I would be having if it wasn't for Paul and Syann. And so there is a catching up going on even here in bringing about the different set of ideas, a different way of operating, a different mechanistic to the universe. So I find that catching up thing interesting. The other point of it is, and this is very briefly, is I'm not certain that material science is ever going to catch up. I think by the time they catch up, there'll no longer be material science. And what we'll have is just an understanding of how things work and moving along a path of a better understanding, a better functionality of physical reality and the realities that are out there.
I'm not sure you're aware of Donald Hoffman at all, who is putting out ideas, in terms of describing the universe as conscious agents and basically seeing consciousness as primary and matter as secondary. And this is why I heard about that before starting to listen to more on the sort of the channeling side, and it all came together. But I definitely see the universe as conscious as primary now, and I feel it just makes more sense, and it takes less miracles, as Donald likes to say, in terms of you don't need matter first and then another miracle to create consciousness. All you need is the one miracle for consciousness to exist, and then matter is almost manifest by consciousness.
Joe, let's ask one question of everybody listening to this. Where were you before you were born? And if you understand that is the question, that is the question that opens everything else up, because there's only either or in this. There's either no source consciousness and we're all just some big mistake, right? Or there is source consciousness, and every single individual that incarnates here, these billions of people, somehow magically manage to create their own consciousness, learn, have the capacity to learn, interact, communicate. And it's laughable, honestly, to believe that we sort of crawled up out of some ooze, and that magically now we're all able to pass over, come back, you're able to communicate with spirit people, they give really good information as well, they evidence themselves. So it's either or. To me, it's just the either, because which is that source consciousness exists and it actually knows what it's doing.
There's some interesting debates on how, even just to talk about some of the most simple bacteria, how that could have been created through random events with the basic amino acids or various the chemicals that can be around that make up these bodies, and it's just astronomical.
Right, if you've got 100 million different species on this planet, including insects, dolphins, whatever, imagine all the goo you would need to create all of those in the beginning. To all individuate all of those, and they've all got some level of consciousness with them. But it's not just that. The miracle of how do they all pass over and then all come back in? And they keep coming back in genetically. They seem to hold the same form. I'm not going to get into the whole debate about humans coming from monkeys and all this sorts of thing. It's more about it's just amazing, the whole thing. I find it all really just super interesting.
No, for sure. And going back in terms of the variants and Zeta worlds, do you know if they've got the same level of variance in terms of biodiversity and plant life and animal life?
Yeah, of course. You know, interestingly, the Zetas were telling us that in the very inception of their race, they actually came from plants. They got nothing to do with humans. A lot of humans believe that the Greys and the Zetas are all somehow us in the future. They've got nothing to do with humans. Humans have got nothing to do with the Greys. They're not in any way related to them. The Zetas have talked about their plant life. Interestingly, in one contact situation I had, I was on craft and I got to speak to one of these plant beings, and it was honestly like speaking to God. It was just incredible.
Yeah. I imagine that existence might be quite amazing. I mean, we may even get to touch on it when we have plant medicine, right? Get to experience, to a certain extent, their conscious experience. Is there any relation there with the?
Yeah, like, are you talking about the network, the mycelium network, or?
I was thinking more kind of, well, ayahuasca and stuff. When people take that, are they getting to experience life or having that conscious
psychotropic stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why
relation?
not? That's why I mentioned the mycelial network, because for a lot of people, actually, they say that they've entered into that network using ayahuasca psychotropic stuff.
Okay. And in terms of what Zetas do to eat and grow their own food, is that quite similar at all to how we experience?
So generally, I'm not sure on what's on this planet, but there are beings or entities that probably don't need to actually digest. They can actually assimilate. They can assimilate cellular matter through their skin. The Zetas are the same. They are able to create a liquid, and the liquid is rubbed onto their skin. And of course, the only way that they can expel that is either through energetic work or via their breath work. And so a lot of people say when they go near in contact situations next to a grey that they can smell something that's off. That's because that's how their body expels. Whereas humans obviously have to go to the WC, the water closet. Is that the nice way to say it?
Yeah, or the loo.
Or the loo, they have to go to the loo. So, yeah, like every race has to somehow expel what they've taken in that creates energy, and then the waste product of that as well. So they do grow their own plant life, but they do not destroy the plant. They only take off the plant, the specific plant life, what the plant gives, what will give. So you'd have another race that specifically perform that function as well.
I imagine that they don't have farms and chickens and sheep like we do at all, but are there any races out there that have anything equivalent to a farm? Or I imagine it's quite rare to eat meat.
Oh, look, I don't know, and I don't believe anybody would probably have it. Nobody has all the answers. We've only got just one piece of the puzzle. But I'll tell you what does exist. They've actually taken genetic material from every single animal on the planet here and every insect, and they've recreated it somewhere else.
Okay.
As a backup.
Well, Joe, if you can imagine a race of being non-human race of beings with animals and farms and all of that, the very fact that you can imagine it means that it exists, because you can't imagine something that doesn't exist. So you've got your answers within your question.
Okay. I imagine that the universe is full of everything and everything between, so it's more than possible. But I do also think that the idea of eating meat is a low frequency aspect of reality. And
so this is the thing, is that when a race comes and views this planet, they see what we do. I don't eat meat, neither does Syann either. And they go, well, look at that. All those cattle are going into some place and they're coming out in cellophane packages. What's going on here? Oh, look at that. Those beings on that planet are actually eating them. What's that all about? Those beings that they're eating are made of consciousness. Why are they doing that? You know,
They don't see animals as animals. They see them as their distinct own separate races.
individuated
So they
race,
see one race,
Mm.
the human race,
eating.
eating multiple other races.
Yeah.
That's the way an extraterrestrial views it.
That's why I couldn't
Yeah.
even try. Just like no,
Have you always been vegetarian, or?
no,
Yeah.
not for about. You
I've been vegetarian since I was 11.
before she was
Yeah.
born, she was a vegetarian,
That's true.
and that's how hardcore. And
Yeah.
me, probably about 25 years. Yes, easily.
That's interesting. And in terms of life again, do you know for children of the Zetas, do they have school? Do they have lessons and things?
Yeah, absolutely. I was taken to one of their lessons. The Zetas only sleep once a week, so a lesson can last 3 days. Okay,
Right. Okay.
but the difference is what they teach. So they're not.
When you say
teaching
3 days in their life, or 3 of our days?
3 of our days, yeah.
Okay.
So you know, probably I don't know, maybe just a couple of hours, but 3 days because everything's much slower here. The thing is when I went to the class, there was like thousands of little Zetas everywhere on these sort of an auditorium, and they had this multi-dimensional gateway set up, and they asked me to come down, and I was standing there, and they're talking about me going through that gateway. I'm looking at it going, I'm not going through that. I'm just not going through that. And they're teaching the children how the gateways work. And then I just refused. And because I said I didn't want to walk through it, they said, well, go and sit back down, right? So what they did was they got one of the other Zetas to come and step through the gateway and step back. It was the most amazing thing that I've seen. This technology, it was like streams of different light. As the photons came down and you stepped through it, you actually stepped into another reality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another reality is another dimension, another multiverse.
Another dimension, this physical reality, it depends on where you, I'll give you an example of this. And some people out there are going to know that I'm telling the truth. This is the thing. A lot of people will sense that they're being observed and watched in their own home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's technology that they have on planet, and it's a very, very long facility, and it's got all these big oval type domes in there, and you can lean over and look into them. When you look into them, you can see into houses, you can see into buildings, you can see into anywhere. All you've got to do is change what they class as an address, like a geophysical address, and you can see into what's taking place there. Now, anyone that has looked up and seen these portals in their homes, these spinning portals, will know that they're being viewed. So there'll be a lot of people that are listening to this going, yep, seen them.
Doesn't give much in the way of privacy then in lives of these pieces.
That's like saying, do spirit people watch you when you're, in your home? Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
No privacy? What's privacy?
Yeah, really.
It's some people might be listening to that and thinking, oh goodness me, when I'm out and about and just doing everyday things, people are watching me. So
yeah, basically, probably I won't mention alfoil, but anyway.
And you mentioned about sleeping. Do they sleep like us in terms of? You said that it's slightly different, but is it the same? Do they go to a bed? Do they lie down? Or I think I've heard actually that they have an ability like dolphins to half sleep.
Yeah,
is that right?
So what they do is they've got technology that cuts out like an egg shape into the catacomb. So on one planet, underneath the ground, they've got catacomb. And they have these egg-shaped processes that are as big, like maybe 4 meters, 5 meters long, maybe 3 or 4 meters wide. But each one is cut into the specific substrate at the same frequency of the being that lives in it. You would go to the ocean to ground, possibly, or go hug a tree. Like me, I would do that as well. they would just step into their alcove, and that alcove is designed to be the frequency that they should be. So if anything's happened to them, then they're out of frequency, they can just step into that. Once they step into it, they lay onto a specific surface, and they're able to just shut off one side of their brain because they're in the frequency that is regrounding them, realigning them. They've only got to stay there for maybe an hour, flip over to the other side for another hour. That's it for 7 days.
Okay, and they're recharged and ready to go again. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about the hybridization side of things. And just to start, what is a hybrid?
Okay, so a hybrid is a under agreement with mum and dad, a human mum and dad. The higher self has been spoken to by a race and said, we would like to incarnate through your child onto planet and support the human race via consciousness. Spirit people first are required to enliven the physical form. Once the cells start to combine and create the physical form of the child, the spirit people are already inhabiting that creation. So of course we know that once spirit people leave, the physical body dies and degrades. So spirit people are required, their free will is required as well to allow the hybrid process to take place. Extraterrestrials come in and they bind consciously with the spirit person, and they create a symbiotic relationship of consciousness. They then are born and they create hybrid humans. And there's about 30% of the planet with multiple races that have done that. Some people have said that the Greys are trying to hybridize the planet. We're taking copies of humans, creating copies, all this. That's not happening at all. There's a reason that that's not happening, is because they have to have spirit people's permission to do that. Now, they may be able to somehow misguide the human into believing that they're having the best interest at heart of the child, but the spirit person's more savvy, and they're not going to allow any consciousness to bind with them that they can see does not have the highest possible interest of human consciousness. So this is why the whole theory of, humans being cloned, humans being changed, humans doing this and that, and the hybridization of the human race actually isn't possible.
And you mentioned about cloning. What about walk-ins? Is that another thing that exists? What's a walk-in? Is that a hybridization thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some people choose their point of exit, but in doing so, they can also choose to allow a different spirit person to come and exist. So spirit people don't actually have to come through the birthing process. They can come through any time. And the reason we know that is because trance mediums are able to allow spirits to come and speak through them. Okay? And trance mediumship and deep trance mediumship and physical mediumship have been around for many, many years. Leslie Flint, Helen Duncan, John Campbell Sloan, Didi Young, I think his last name is. These people were deep trance mediums. So spirits have always been able to come and inhabit the human form when they require. If a person makes the decision to step out and another one steps in, that's classed as a walk-in.
Okay. In terms of hybridization, I guess you said, are we all hybrids then? But some are more hybridized than others. Is that a way of looking at it?
Very good. That's very good. Imagine we're all from source consciousness. Guess what? We're all extraterrestrials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What
are we kind of? I've heard we're genetic royalty in a way, that we've got so much variation in us and seeding from various things.
Yeah. So it may be that if this glass of water is consciousness, if I put one drop of blue ink into the water and then turn around, you can barely see that there's anything in it. But it still is not the same as it was when it started. What about if I put in 3 or 4 drops or 10 drops? Of course, then the color of the water starts to shift. You can think of consciousness and hybrid minds in the same manner as that, that not everybody has the same level of consciousness. Other people are more conscious than other people. It doesn't mean you're any better or anything like that. Nobody's special. It's just that we're different. And we are all different anyway, aren't we? Because we're individuals.
Yeah. And I imagine the people that may have a different state of consciousness from their hybridization or maybe have more telepathy, precognition, these sort of things.
Yeah, it depends what symbols you have with you. So your symbols that were brought with you when you incarnate, and the symbols are the ones that are based around the types of abilities you have. A lot of people that have a different level of knowledge understand that geometric shapes are brought with you, and the geometric shapes aren't just human geometric shapes. They're based in multi-dimensional type functionality. And the geometric shapes are interlocked to create certain functions within you to perform. Maybe that you have a function or a symbol that allows you to remote view. Another person may be really good at astral travel. Another person may be really good at allowing healing. Another person might be good at extraterrestrial contact. This is because we bring with us all of the functions and all of the tools that are required when we incarnate to actually perform the functions that are required.
So I don't quite understand what do you mean by geometric shapes?
Yeah.
And how that helps.
Yeah. So on craft, if you look at some of the technology that's used to interact with the craft, they'll have these types of multidimensional shapes. And if they want to perform one function, they'll activate that shape. If they want to then perform another function, they may either combine shapes or use a different multidimensional shape. Humans that incarnate as hybrids bring all of their, well, classed as your geometric shapes with you, all of your symbols with you. Some people are given downloads of symbols once they have incarnated as well. And so once they have those symbols, they're able to work through them. And as they open each symbol up, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. As they keep working down towards the core, towards their consciousness, they're able to activate more and more abilities within themselves. Of course, spirit people know this and they do the same thing. So some people may have certain abilities to be mediumistic. Other people don't have it because they don't have the geometry within their consciousness to perform that function.
It's been amazing. And thank you, Walter, for coming on and giving your assessment of all these things. It's been really useful, and hopefully I'll be seeing you again soon as well.
Sure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Paul, Syann, we'll be talking soon, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.